Sloane Pemberton was having the absolute worst Thursday of her entire life. And considering she'd just survived 3 consecutive all-nighters at her Boston law firm, that was saying something. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for walking into her grandmother's Charleston estate and finding him sprawled across the vintage settee like he owned the place. Dawson Fitzgerald, the boy who'd accidentally launched a dodgeball directly into her face during 5th grade gym class. The teenager who'd photoshopped her yearbook picture to give her vampire fangs and distributed copies throughout the entire school. The same insufferable jerk who'd asked her to winter formal at 16, then showed up with her best friend on his arm instead, laughing about how desperate Sloane had looked waiting for him. And now here he was, at 28, somehow even more frustratingly handsome, sitting in her grandmother's parlor wearing a charcoal cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, flashing that infuriating smirk she'd spent the last 12 years trying to forget. No, Sloane dropped her suitcase with a decisive thud. Absolutely not. Grandmother, what is he doing here? Dawson raised his crystal wine glass in a mock toast. Sloane Pemberton. Still about as subtle as a freight train. Missed you too, sunshine. Don't call me that, Fitzgerald. Language, dear. Grandmother Vivienne emerged from the kitchen, elegant as always in her cream linen suit, completely oblivious to the tension thick enough to slice. Dawson, be a dear and pour a glass for Sloane. She's going to need it. I don't need anything from him. Sloane crossed her arms. And I'm still waiting for an explanation. You said urgent family emergency. You didn't mention the emergency included Satan in expensive knitwear. Dawson stood up, and Sloane hated that he'd gotten even taller. 6'2" of pure arrogance wrapped in gym muscles and designer cologne. Satan? How original, Pemberton. 12 years of Stanford Law School and that's the best you've got. Northwestern. She corrected automatically, immediately regretting taking the bait. Right, Northwestern. His smile widened. Must be exhausting. Always needing to prove you're the smartest person in every room. How's that working out for you? I will physically launch you through that window. Sloane took a step forward. Grandmother, I need you to call someone, because I'm about to commit a felony in your antique-filled parlor. Sit down, both of you. Vivienne struck her cane against the hardwood floor with a crack that echoed like a gavel. Sloane blinked. Her grandmother never raised her voice. In 75 years, Vivienne Pemberton had been the definition of Southern grace. Soft-spoken elegance and impeccable manners. Something was very, very wrong. Dawson must have sensed it too, because the cocky grin vanished from his face. They both sank into opposite armchairs, Sloane still glaring daggers across the space. Vivienne sighed heavily and placed an ancient-looking document on the coffee table. The paper was yellowed, edges worn, with red wax seals along the margins. I need to tell you both about an agreement our grandparents made a very long time ago. In 1952, to be precise. Sloane frowned. 1952? Grandmother? That was over 70 years ago. What does this have to do with? You two have been promised to each other since birth. Silence, complete, absolute, deafening silence. Sloane blinked once, twice, 3 times. I'm sorry, what? Dawson laughed, a short, disbelieving sound that came out almost strangled. This is a prank, right? Where are the cameras hidden? Grandmother Vivienne, you're usually terrible at jokes, but this takes the cake. This is not a joke. Vivienne's voice was steel firm, without a trace of humor. Theodore Fitzgerald and Augustus Pemberton, our grandfathers, made a blood pact, a binding contract promising to unite the families through marriage of the first grandchildren born after the year 2000. Sloane felt ice flood her veins. That's medieval. It's illegal. It's perfectly legal. Dawson already had his phone out, and Sloane hated recognizing he was doing exactly what she would, frantically researching. Pre-1970 marriage promise contracts with testamentary clauses. No way. This can be binding in South Carolina if... He stopped talking, face draining of color. If what? Sloan snatched the phone from his hand and read the screen. If substantial property or inheritance depends on fulfillment of the agreement, she slowly raised her eyes to her grandmother. What property? Vivian pointed toward the window. This estate, the Kiowa Island property, the Savannah House, the California Vineyard, company stock, in total approximately $42 million. Sloan watched the phone slip from her fingers onto the cushion. Dawson had stopped breathing. And there's more. Vivian continued merciless. If you don't marry before Sloan's 30th birthday, which is in exactly... She glanced at her watch. 6 months, the entire fortune gets donated to charity. You'll both be disinherited completely. 6 months? Sloan and Dawson shouted simultaneously, then shot each other furious looks for agreeing on something. This is insane. Sloan stood, starting to pace. Grandmother, you cannot be serious. We hate each other. Since we were 5 years old, he sabotaged my 10th birthday party by telling everyone I still wore training wheels on my bike. You told the entire swim team I was afraid of the deep end. Dawson jumped up too, pointing at her. I was 8 and still learning, and don't even start about senior promming. You deserved what happened at senior prom. I didn't even do anything. That was Brett Coleman. You knew it was Brett and didn't warn me. Because watching you dump punch on the wrong guy was comedy gold. I'm going to destroy you. Try staying in the same room for 5 minutes first. Vivian struck her cane again, freezing them both mid-argument. I know you have history, but this agreement was made when our grandfathers saved each other's companies during the Great Depression. It's a debt of honor, a sacred promise between families. Sloan ran her hands through her auburn hair, destroying her perfect bun. There has to be a legal loophole. Something. Anything. I've read this contract dozens of times. Vivian handed her the document. It's all there, clear language, witnesses, notarized. You need to marry in an official ceremony, stay married for a minimum of 1 year, and make at least 6 public appearances as a couple. A year! Dawson looked ready to pass out. I can't spend 6 minutes near her without wanting to throw myself off a cliff. The feeling is completely mutual, Fitzgerald. Completely. Vivian stood, leaning on her cane. You have 48 hours to decide. Either accept the terms and begin wedding preparations, or forfeit $42 million and watch generations of family history crumble to dust. She walked toward the door, then paused and turned. One more thing, the press already knows. I sent the official announcement this morning. Tomorrow, every Charleston newspaper will be running the headline, Pemberton and Fitzgerald, heirs to finally fulfill 1952. Promise. Wedding of the century confirmed. Sloan felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. You did what? But Vivian had already left, abandoning them in the parlor with an impossible contract, a fortune at stake, and 28 years of bitter rivalry crackling between them. Dawson was the first to break the silence, his voice low and dangerously calm. If we have to do this, we need rules. Sloan spun to face him, hazel eyes blazing. Agreed. Rule number 1, you sleep on the couch. Rule number 2, no pretending we're some love-struck couple. This is purely transactional. Rule number 3, the second that year is up, we sign divorce papers and never see each other again. Perfect. Dawson extended his hand, dead serious. Do we have a deal? Sloan stared at his hand, the same hand that put a fake spider in her lunchbox. The same hand that accidentally knocked her science fair project off the table. The same hand that was trembling slightly now, she noticed. He was just as terrified as she was. For some absurd reason, that made her feel a tiny bit less alone in this nightmare. She shook his hand firmly. We have a deal. But Fitzgerald? What? Sloan smiled. A small, dangerous smile. If you do anything to sabotage this and cost me $42 million, I will personally make sure you regret the day you were born. Dawson smiled back, that infuriating grin she despised. Pemberton, if I were going to sabotage something, you wouldn't see it coming. They stood there, hands still clasped, staring each other down, and Sloane had the distinct feeling she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. A devil with piercing gray eyes, cashmere sweaters, and an absolutely maddening smile. 6 months, 1 year of marriage, $42 million, and the man she hated most in the entire world. What could possibly go wrong? Sloane woke up to the sound of something crashing downstairs, followed by a very creative string of muttered curses. She sat up in her childhood bedroom, floral wallpaper she'd begged to change at 14 still mocking her from every wall, and checked her phone. 6:47 a.m. 47 unread messages, 19 missed calls, and 1 text from her assistant Rebecca that simply read, "Boss, you're trending on Twitter. Call me now." Perfect, Sloane groaned, falling back onto the pillows. Just perfect. Another crash from downstairs, followed by what sounded distinctly like Dawson arguing with the coffee maker. Right. She was stuck in a house with her sworn enemy, who apparently couldn't operate basic kitchen appliances. Sloane dragged herself out of bed, threw on yoga pants and an old Northwestern sweatshirt, and padded downstairs barefoot, her auburn hair in a messy bun that would have horrified her professional colleagues. The scene in the kitchen was something. Dawson stood in front of the espresso machine, designer pajama pants and a fitted white t-shirt that had no business looking that good at 7 in the morning, glaring at the machine like it had personally insulted his mother. Coffee grounds were scattered across the marble counter. A shattered mug lay in pieces near his feet. Having trouble? Sloane leaned against the doorframe, unable to resist. Dawson spun around, and she was gratified to see he looked as exhausted as she felt. His dark hair was sticking up in multiple directions, and there were actual circles under his gray eyes. "This machine is possessed." He gestured accusingly at the espresso maker. "I've tried everything. Just makes angry noises and spits water at me." "You're supposed to use the small cup, genius." Sloane walked over, nudged him aside with her hip, and had a perfect cappuccino brewing in under 30 seconds. "Also, you use ground espresso, not whole beans. Were you raised by wolves?" "I have people who make coffee for me." Dawson crossed his arms defensively. "Some of us have actual demanding careers. You run a tech startup that makes apps for people to rate their houseplants." Sloane took a deliberately slow sip of her cappuccino. "I'm a senior associate at Morrison & Fletcher. We are not the same. My houseplant app has 42 million users and was valued at $300 million last quarter." His eyes narrowed. "But sure, keep telling yourself you're more successful while you're drowning in student loans and billing hours." Sloane opened her mouth for a devastating comeback when her phone erupted with incoming calls. She glanced at the screen. Her boss, her mother, her college roommate, a reporter from the Charleston Post and Courier. Ah. Dawson pulled out his own phone, which was also lighting up like a Christmas tree. So it started. What started? He turned his phone to show her the screen. Charleston Post and Courier. Society wedding shocker. Pemberton Fitzgerald Union fulfills 70-year-old promise. Southern living. The real-life arranged marriage taking Charleston by storm. People magazine. Tech mogul Dawson Fitzgerald to wed high-powered attorney in contract marriage. Here's everything we know. And the photos. Someone had dug up their elementary school class picture, where 5-year-old Sloane was giving 5-year-old Dawson bunny ears while he stuck his tongue out at her. "We look like we want to murder each other," Sloane observed. "Because we do, present tense." Dawson scrolled through more articles. "This is a nightmare. My board of directors is going to have questions. So many questions. Try explaining this to a senior partner who thinks I should be focused solely on making partner." Sloane's phone rang again. Her mother, 3rd time. She declined it. "We need a strategy." Agreed. Dawson finally managed to make himself a coffee, though it looked slightly suspicious. Vivian mentioned we need 6 public appearances. We should get started before this media circus gets worse. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. The Magnolia Foundation dinner. Everyone who's anyone in Charleston will be there. Sloane pulled up the event on her phone. If we're going to do this, we might as well jump into the deep end. A gala. Dawson looked pained. With hundreds of people watching our every move. You're the one who wanted to get it over with. Fine, but we need to get our story straight. He grabbed a notepad from the counter. People are going to ask questions. Lots of questions. How did we fall in love after hating each other for 28 years? Sloane thought for a moment, her lawyer brain clicking into gear. Reunion at Vivian's 75th birthday party last year. We hadn't seen each other in ages. Something had changed. We started talking, actually talking, and realized we'd both grown up. That's terrible. Dawson made a face. Way too generic. We need something with specific details people can latch onto. Fine, genius. You come up with something better. He tapped the pen against his lips, thinking. Sloane tried not to notice how distractingly perfect his lips were. That was irrelevant to this situation. What if we say it was a series of accidental encounters? I was in Boston for a tech conference. Ran into you at a coffee shop. You spilled your drink on me. Very on brand for our history. And when we started arguing about who owed whom a new shirt, we realized we were actually enjoying the argument. Sloane blinked. That was actually not bad. We kept accidentally running into each other. Each time we'd argue, but it became more like playful banter. Then one night I was working late on a case. You brought me coffee to apologize for some snarky email you'd sent and I kissed you. Dawson finished, his voice oddly quiet. To shut you up, because you were overthinking everything, and you kissed me back. Their eyes met across the kitchen island. For a second, just a second, Sloane forgot they were making this up. His gray eyes had gone dark, intense, and the air between them felt charged with something she absolutely did not want to examine. Right. She cleared her throat, breaking eye contact. That's the story. Believable, has details. Explains the transition from enemies to this. We should practice it, Dawson said suddenly. Practice what? Selling it, being a couple. We're both terrible actors. If we walk into that gala tomorrow night and can barely stand near each other, no one's going to buy this. Sloane hated that he was right. Fine. What do you suggest? We spend today acting like a couple. Here, in private, where only Vivian can judge us. Get comfortable with basic couple things. Hand-holding, standing close. Not flinching every time we touch. This is ridiculous. This is $42 million. Dawson countered. Your choice, Pemberton. Sloane glared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but we're setting ground rules. 2 hours later, Sloane was seriously regretting this plan. You're holding my hand like it's a dead fish. Dawson complained as they walked through Vivian's garden. Can you at least pretend you don't find me repulsive? I'm not pretending anything. This is my neutral hand-holding face. Your face looks like you're being forced to eat expired mayonnaise. Sloane yanked her hand away. Maybe if your hand wasn't so sweaty. My hands are not sweaty. You're the one with the death grip. I think you cut off my circulation. I barely touched you. Children! Vivian's voice rang out from the terrace, where she sat with her afternoon tea, clearly enjoying the show. You're supposed to be practicing looking in love, not reenacting your greatest playground fights. This is impossible. Sloane threw her hands up. We can't even walk 5 feet without arguing. Then don't walk. Vivian suggested calmly. Try something simpler. Sit on that bench. Look at each other. Have an actual conversation. About what? Dawson demanded. We have nothing in common except mutual loathing and dead grandparents who ruined our lives. Figure it out. Vivian took a delicate sip of tea. You have 18 hours before that gala. Either learn to tolerate each other, or prepare to kiss $42 million goodbye. Sloane stalked over to the garden bench and sat down with excessive force. Dawson followed, keeping a careful foot of space between them. Silence. Awkward, heavy silence. So, Dawson finally said, Northwestern. How'd you end up there? Scholarship. Full ride. Sloane picked at a loose thread on her sweatshirt. They have an excellent corporate law program. You went to... Where was it? University of Phoenix Online. MIT, he said dryly. Computer science, then Stanford for my MBA. Show off. Says the woman who graduated summa cum laude and made law review. He raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I Googled you. Your firm's website has a whole paragraph about your accomplishments. It's nauseatingly impressive. Sloan blinked, surprised. You Googled me? Know your enemy and all that. But he looked slightly uncomfortable. Besides, I figured I should know who I'm legally binding myself to for a year. Did you Google me? Obviously, Sloan admitted. Your company, Green Thumb, has a surprisingly solid business model. I expected something more frivolous. Wow, an actual compliment. Should I get that notarized? Don't push it, Fitzgerald. But despite herself, Sloan felt the corner of her mouth twitch, almost like a smile. Dawson noticed, and something shifted in his expression. Less defensive, almost curious. Why law? He asked, and he sounded genuinely interested. I remember you wanted to be a marine biologist in middle school. You did that whole presentation on saving sea turtles. Sloan was startled he remembered that. My dad got sick my junior year of college. Cancer. We had insurance, but the medical bills, the loopholes, the denials, the endless fighting with companies who were supposed to help us. She swallowed. He died 6 months before I started law school. Switched to corporate law because I never wanted to feel that powerless again. The words hung in the air between them. I'm sorry, Dawson said quietly. I didn't know. Why would you? We hadn't spoken in years. Still, I'm sorry. There was something in his voice, something genuine. No sarcasm, no snark, just simple human empathy. Sloan looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since she'd arrived yesterday. When did his eyes get those little crinkles at the corners? Had they always been there? What about you? She asked softly. Why the plant app? That seems oddly specific for an MIT computer science guy. Dawson's jaw tightened slightly. My mom. She had Alzheimer's. Early onset, diagnosed when I was 20. She forgot a lot of things toward the end, but she could still remember her garden. Every plant, every flower. He stared at his hands. The app started as a way to help people like her. To keep memories alive through something tangible, something growing. Sloan felt her chest constrict. Dawson, She died 3 years ago. He continued, voice carefully neutral. Never got to see the app launch. But yeah, that's why I do it. Every time someone uses it to remember their grandmother's rose garden or their dad's tomato plants, it feels like she's still here, somehow. Without thinking, Sloan reached over and took his hand. Not the awkward, forced hand-holding from before. This was different, intentional, comforting. He looked down at their intertwined fingers, then up at her face, surprise written clearly across his features. We've been horrible to each other, Sloan said quietly, for so long, but I'm sorry about your mom. That's really beautiful, what you did. I'm sorry about your dad. Dawson's thumb brushed against her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. And for being an absolute nightmare to you growing up. The dodgeball thing was genuinely an accident, but most of the other stuff. I was a stupid kid who didn't know how to handle having a massive crush on the smartest girl in school. Sloan's brain short-circuited. Wait, what? Dawson's eyes widened as he realized what he'd just said. I didn't mean... You had a crush on me? Had. Past tense. Very past tense. Ancient history. We were children. He was talking too fast, his ears turning red. It doesn't mean anything now, obviously, because we hate each other. Present tense. You put a fake spider in my lunchbox because you smiled at Jeremy Whitmore during algebra and I was 12 and stupid. You photoshopped vampire fangs onto my yearbook picture. You looked cute. The fangs were cute vampire themed. He groaned, dropping his face into his free hand. I'm making this so much worse. Sloane stared at him, her mind reeling. All those years, all that torment, all those pranks and insults and rivalry, because he'd had a crush on her? You are the worst at communication. She finally managed. Yeah, well, you're the worst at... He trailed off. Actually, you're annoyingly good at most things. It's infuriating. And then, despite everything, despite the contract, the money, the decades of animosity, Sloane laughed. A real laugh, not bitter or sarcastic, just genuinely amused. Dawson stared at her like she'd grown a second head. What's so funny? Us, this, everything. Sloane shook her head. We're about to walk into Charleston's most prestigious charity gala and convince hundreds of people we're madly in love. When 48 hours ago we couldn't stand being in the same room. And now I'm finding out that our entire childhood rivalry was because you had the emotional maturity of a potato. Hey, a very rich MIT-educated potato. But still. Dawson's mouth twitched. Then he was laughing too, and suddenly they were both sitting on that garden bench, still holding hands, laughing like idiots, while Vivian watched from the terrace with a very satisfied smile. When the laughter finally died down, Dawson squeezed her hand gently. So, tomorrow night. Think we can pull this off? Sloane looked at him, at this man who'd tormented her childhood, who built a company honoring his mother's memory, who apparently had the worst crush communication skills in human history, and felt something shift in her chest. Maybe this wouldn't be completely terrible. Yeah, she said softly. I think we might actually manage it. Partners? He offered. Partners, she agreed. And if her heart did a tiny, traitorous flip when he smiled at her, really smiled, no sarcasm, no walls, well, that was nobody's business but her own. The next evening, Sloane stood in front of her grandmother's full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress was stunning, a deep emerald silk that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, with a slit that went scandalously high up her thigh. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, with a few curls framing her face. Professional makeup that somehow made her look like herself, but more. Vivian outdid herself. She murmured to her reflection. A knock on the door. Sloane, car's here. Dawson's voice. We should... He opened the door and stopped dead. Just stopped, staring. Sloane felt heat creep up her neck. Is it too much? I can change? No. Dawson's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. No. You look incredible. He wasn't looking so bad himself. Black tuxedo that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body. White shirt, black bow tie. His dark hair was styled back, and those gray eyes were locked on her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. You clean up okay too, Fitzgerald. I've been standing here for 30 seconds trying to think of something clever to say, and my brain has completely short-circuited, he admitted. So I'm just going to go with, wow. Sloane smiled despite herself. Wow works. He stepped into the room and pulled out a small velvet box. Vivian said you'd need this, part of the family collection. Inside was a ring, not just any ring, a stunning vintage emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly an antique worth more than Sloane's annual salary. That's, Dawson, I can't... It's temporary, part of the act. But his hands were gentle as he took the ring out. May I? Sloane extended her left hand and watched as Dawson slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He kept holding her hand, his thumb brushing over the ring.